Well, let's get started. I hereby, if we're ready, call to order this meeting of the Strategic Housing Finance Corporation of Travis County. It is May 9th, 11:36 a.m. by my watch, and we are at the beautiful Permitting and Development Center here in Austin on Wilhelmina Delco Drive. The first order of business is the roll call and confirmation of quorum.
President Julio Gonzalez Altamirano.
Present.
Vice President Jan Winning.
Present.
Director Delete Becker.
Present.
Director Keisha Prince.
Present.
Director Lisa Reams. Director Rebecca Weber.
Yeah, I'm here.
We have a quorum.
Yes.
Yes. Is there anybody signed up for forum or citizen communication?
Not that I'm aware of.
Then let's move to our discussion items. Let's begin with the 2023 financial audit, unless staff wants to change the order for that. Nope. Great.
No, so we have with us today Chad Porter with Smith Marion, who are our auditors. Our audit is in near final draft format with mostly some housekeeping to clean up to get to final. And so we hope to be able to deliver that to the board at the May board meeting, if not shortly thereafter, at which point, and Chad will speak to this a bit about the board accepting the audit. So we asked Mr. Porter here today just talk us through not only the financials, but sort of the process and what this means for us as an organization. Make sure he's available to answer any questions you might have. And of course, will also be, can follow up on any of those questions in governance, finance, and administration as we move towards finalization of the audit. So with that, I'm happy to pass it to Mr. Porter.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
You can.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I'm not going to go through the financial numbers with you unless someone really wants me to, but those kind of speak to themselves. What I wanted to basically go through, there's a couple different things that I want to cover because it's an unusual year for you guys, kind of splitting away from the housing authority. And so I wanted to make sure that I explained everything in your audit report to you guys so that you understand what's going on in your audit report. First of all, you're a little bit unique because the audit report for this agency is just basically for you guys. You don't have grantors, you don't have outside individuals looking for your audit report. So you'll notice there's a couple of things that we do in your audit report that are required that we leave off. And that's just to save money in your audit. So you'll notice that in the first page that we have two opinions. There's an opinion on your primary government, which is the core of what you guys do. That's basically the Strategic Finance Housing Corporation. And then you have all these LIHTCs, low-income housing tax credits that you're partnershiped into, and they should be in your financial statements. You have about 30 of those. I didn't count exactly how many you have, but quite a few. And so you would normally be required by an outside grantor like a HUD or anybody would ask you to put those into your audit report. And it takes time and effort to put those into your audit report. It would also hold your audit report up to because you'd have to wait till all those audits were finished for December 31, 23 before you could issue your December 31, 23 report. So historically, we've left those off, but I have to qualify my opinion saying, look, the rules are you're supposed to put those in there. You've left them off. So I don't give any opinion whatsoever on those component units because we don't look at the trial balances. We don't look at the audit reports of those other auditors. So that's what that qualification in there. If you look in there, you'll see that you have a qualified opinion on component units and you have an unqualified opinion, which is a clean opinion on the housing, on this Strategic Housing Finance Corporation. I have a hard time getting it all out. It's a long name. So I hope that kind of explains that part to you and you understand that. There's also another qualification there saying that you don't do your MD&A or management discussion and analysis. That's a required part also, but since you don't have any outside people who are looking for this report, most of the time, most agencies your size would, if they don't have anyone outside, don't spend the time doing the management discussion and analysis. It's kind of a regurgitation of your financial statements that you have to do up at the front. It has to be done by the agency. And so in the past and currently, we have eliminated that and not put that in the financial statements. It's required. And so since it's required, I have to opine and say, hey, there was this piece that was supposed to be done that hasn't been done. That's the management discussion and analysis. If you wanted to do that, it would take some time for somebody. I don't know if it would just still be Subra or who would do that for you. It can't be us. We cannot be part of management, so I can't do management's discussion and analysis. But someone would have to take your last year's balance sheet, compare it to this year's balance sheet, and you basically have to explain any changes. Why did cash go up or down? Why did buildings go up or down? And then you do the same thing for your income statement. And then you have to go through the fixed assets and the change in fixed assets, which you had quite a bit of. So it would take someone to have to go through and explain that and regurgitate it. So if you wanted to do that, we could add it into your audit report, take that qualification out if someone wanted to build the management discussion and analysis. Like I said, in the past, we haven't done it because if it's only for your use, you kind of know what's going on in your financial statements. It seems like kind of jumping through hoops for no reason, incurring cost for no reason. So we've done that in the past, we've left it off. Let's see what else we have in here. Obviously the biggest transaction for you guys this year was the sale of Rosemont. So there is a note disclosure in your financial statements. If you want to read it in more detail, it's on page 13. If you want to flip there, if you have the audit report, you can page 13, I'm sorry, and note 1, it details, and I'm going to summarize it, but it basically, when the storm hit and Rosemont froze pipes and had all kinds of damages, you guys advanced $20 million for the construction costs. Of those construction costs, you received back about $12 million. I'm rounding numbers, okay, to make it easy. So what happened at the end when you sold Rosemont, there was still about $8 million you were supposed to collect from the property that you were not able to collect. And so that part got written off when you sold and took a loss on selling Rosemont. So just so you're kind of aware of that part. And that's the part too, I was kind of making a comment to the management team was, I would encourage you as a board to kind of have a resolution recognizing that. So down the future, when we're 2 or 3 years down the road, I've had experiences like this before where these large losses are happening on a sale of a property. People are always kind of questioning, well, who approved that? When did that get approved? Why was that even done? I don't think the board approved that. That's why I was suggesting that you have a resolution saying that the board recognizes, and I'm not saying it's a bad decision, I'm just saying that it needs probably to be memorialized so that everyone recognizes that it wasn't, the leadership team made the decision without you, the accountants, I've been blamed before, the auditor made this decision, and I'm like, I don't make management decisions. So I would encourage you guys to do a board resolution. Of course, I told management it doesn't have to be done, but best practices, I would encourage you guys to do something where you memorialize that, saying that we recognize we lost this money in this transaction, and accept that and put that into a resolution. The other one we talked about too is that it's a little different. So that one is written off. You're not going to get that $8 million back, right? We sold the property, it's done. You're not getting that money back. There are several other notes receivable on your books, about almost $2.4 million. And if you want to see that, it's in page 21 of this report. And I'm going by the page numbers. I'm sorry. I saw someone was trying to do the PDF. I don't know which PDF page it is. It's on page 21 of the actual report. That has this note disclosure in there. If you keep scrolling down, I think it's further down. I'm not sure what page that's on. Oh, there it is. Okay, so right there is the one I'm talking about right here. So you'll see here you have multiple notes receivable that you've given out for different low-income housing tax credits and RAD deals. All of these loans, consistent with normal processes, are cash flow loans, which means if those entities have cash flow, they'll pay you back these loans. If they do not, they will not make payments. Under accounting principles, if you have a loan set up that way, we have to write that loan down with an allowance saying, we don't really think you're going to get this money in the near future because the way the loan is written is cash flow. And unless they cash flow, which most LIHTCs do not, they're not designed to cash flow, you will not receive payments on these loans. This is different is that we set up an allowance saying we don't think you're going to collect it, but we haven't written off the loans. Rosemont's different. It's gone. We wrote those loans off. You're never going to collect that money. This is sitting here saying we don't think you're going to be able to collect it. Generally, what happens on most of these cash flow loans, I do lots of this across the United States, is that as we finish out the LIHTC, if you don't know, LIHTC usually has about a 15-year life. After that, the tax credits have expired and the investor wants out, and they tend to give you back the asset, being the building. That takes care of paying off the loan because the loan's against the building and the land. And so if you get these tax credits, exiting their partnership and giving you back the land, giving you back the loan, the buildings, you'll forgive these loans because you're getting your asset back that you were supposed to get paid on and you never got paid on. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense to everybody. Other than that, the only other thing, and I'll stop in a minute so you guys can ask questions because it's kind of hard to go through these with questions and answers. But the last one was, you don't have to do a formal acceptance of the audit report as an auditor. I always recommend that you do so that we know when the last audit was accepted, especially if you switch auditors ever. Not suggesting you switch auditors. I'm just saying that it's good practice to say, hey, this is when we received the audit. This is when we approved the audit. In case some reason the audit you don't have any submissions that are due. So I guess to you, it's not as big a deal, but a lot of times with grantors, if it doesn't get submitted to the grantor, but you approved the audit several months ago, why did it not get to the grantor? Kind of just documents when you as a board said, hey, I accept and approve this audit report. It can go out to whoever it needs to go to. So best practices is do that as a board, is to formalize when you accepted and approved the audit report. That's basically what I had. I was just trying to do kind of top level for you guys on the big items for you for this year and kind of get you up to date on your report and what's in there. But I'm able to answer any questions you want about the audit process or anything in your audit report.
Thank you, sir. May I preface a question? I just did want to say that we do intend at the May meeting to bring a resolution, assuming we're ready to accept the audit and to recognize the Rosemont loss. So
awesome.
Director Wenning had
we may be able to do it in one resolution. We'll see.
And then Director Weber. Director Wenning, you have the floor for questions.
Thank you. First off, I just want to thank you for it was really easy to understand and follow your presentation, and I just really want to tell you how much I appreciate the way you broke it down into everyday plain speak. So appreciate that a lot. And do you have a date for when this was conducted? I was looking at the first page of the document, but it's not dated. When
the audit report has to be dated upon you guys signing a management representation letter, kind of the date that you approve the report to get finalized. So you'll see there's blank spots in there for a date. That date's yet to be determined. I don't know when you're if you approve it May 22nd, then it'll say May 22nd on there. Does that make sense?
When did you do the work?
When did we do the work? Hold on, let me look at I have to go back and look at my calendar. I don't remember exactly, but I think it was.
The on-site work was in March.
Oh, okay.
I think it was in March. I'm trying to find it in my calendar.
Okay.
Any other questions, Director Wenning?
Finally, just on page 21, for your own attention to that detail, just pointing out that one of the oddities about those non-collectibles is that they were transfers to a different entity, to HATC.
Yeah, they weren't loans to the partnerships from
Right.
us. They were loans to HATC
Right.
to invest in their partnerships.
Exactly.
So,
Yes.
Thank you.
Director Weber has the floor.
Thank you. I just want to follow up on that. So that means we would never actually get the building to satisfy the loan, right? Because we have we don't have any.
I think in principle you are correct. One of the things that as staff we have started to do is to try to pull all of the background material on these notes, both from board resolutions to the legal documents, etc., to really understand what the chain of the transaction was. So, we will not have resolved that as of December 31st, 2023, but so that if the board ever wants to take action, whether it's to seek the funds or to forgive it, you have as good a picture as we can provide you of what the substance of the transaction was.
Wonderful. And then just a really basic question. It's Josh, right?
Chad.
Yes.
Sorry. A couple of times you said it is required.
Yes.
By who? Who
Governmental
would-
auditing standards, you kind of follow two different things. You follow governmental accounting standards, which is GASB. That's who writes the rules, and they have required items that have to be in your audit report. So that's who's requiring it. That's who we attest that we did the audit in accordance with, and you're following governmental accounting standards.
Got it. And is that somewhere in the audit itself?
Yeah, in our opinion, you'll see it refers to generally accepted generally accepted auditing standards.
Got
Yeah.
it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? All right, anybody else have any questions? The floor is yielded back to me, and I have a question about page 15 and the component units.
Okay.
So the deletions on net capital assets is the result of us no longer including the component units in our overall asset picture. If I understood the logic of how the opinions were developed.
Just Rosemont.
Correct. So that schedule you're looking at there, if you see all those deletions, those all are the buildings for Rosemont, land, building, all the repairs that were done to it, and the equipment that went along with it.
So this is just Rosemont?
Yes.
Okay.
Because last year,
Mhm.
we didn't have to my knowledge, we have not had, at least in the last several audits, the component units integrated, and
Okay.
so we're not deleting them because they were not there.
This is just a sort of open thought, as I recognize that this material is correct and pristine.
Right.
I'm not arguing with that. Our ownership interest in our component units is of some value.
Yes.
How exactly is that captured here, if at all?
It's
be able to-
generally, in general, your ownership in those. Okay, so let's back up for a second. Rosemont is not a component unit. Rosemont was part of Strategic. It was a project that Strategic owned. It's different than a component unit. The component units, you don't own, you're a partner in them, and you're generally a very small partner in them, usually 0.01%. The value of what you have in those partnerships is generally so small, they don't include it in your financial statements because it's like hundreds of dollars, not thousands, not millions. The buildings are worth that much money, but your ownership in them is very minimal. And so generally those are not shown on your financial statements. Granted, there's nothing that says you can't go put them on. We're just, as auditors, it's so small, we generally say it's not material. We don't make you put it on. Nothing stops you from doing it. Does that make sense?
Yes, on the Rosemont, totally understand. That I got. The component units, we are in the partnership entitled to a series of cash flows. We also technically, quote unquote, own the land, although we ground lease it back. And so just the immediate surface impact on me of saying the partnerships do not have trackable worth is requires some adjustment on terms of my intellectual understanding of how we're documenting our asset position, if that makes any sense. Do you want to add something to that, Diana?
I did. I think, well, first of all, I think there are a couple of things here. First, I do think in the future, I'm very open to us having the conversation about integrating all of our component units into the financials. It will cost us more, it will take longer, but I think this board is, interested in full information and transparency as so far as is practical. The second thing is, so yes, that there's the cash flow value. The second piece is that although our ownership interest is very small, and in fact, the ownership may be, while we hold title to the land, we may be required to return it to the developer at the end of the partnership. The thing that is not so clear is that we may have a right to proceeds at sale which exceeds our ownership interest, right? Our literal ownership interest may be 0.001% of the value of the whole thing. But as we're seeing with some other transactions, if the thing sells, we have a right to 5% of net sales proceeds. So I think that is something we could look at in the future of trying to estimate, what might be the market value of the partnership, interest.
And I don't want to go beyond what GAAP requires of us. I also don't want to put ourselves in a position where we are strategically not able to take out debt or convince potential equity joint venture partners, blah, 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 because of the audit. But what I'm hearing is, in terms of the accounting standard, because of the on-paper infinite small ownership, literal, of the GP, regardless of these terms and how they play out in our empirical existence, the accounting nature of them is that they are so tiny as to not be required for us to go into. And it has the added bonus of we get to have a smaller audit. Am I understanding the thread here correctly?
Yeah, that's correct. And if you did want to know your value in each one, you should be receiving from each of those tax credit properties a K1. K1 is a document that's given to each partner and tells you your partnership value that you have in it. I would venture, I haven't seen them because we don't gather those all up. I would venture a lot of them are negative.
Huh, okay.
So just so you know, let me enlighten you a little bit, but on tax credit properties, they're generally losing money on a regular basis. They're designed to lose money, which makes it hilarious when the IRS comes to audit tax credits. And I've had them come audit tax credits and they ask, why is this losing money? And we say it's designed to lose money. That's why the investors come. The investors come for two reasons. One, they want the tax credits that they originally get, and they want the losses, the write-offs, to put on their financial statements to help offset their income as an investor. So you're very well entitled to getting all those. You should be getting tax returns for every one of your ones you're an investor in because you're a partner in it. You should be getting it. My experience from looking at most of those, not yours in particular, but I do hundreds of these across the United States, I would say about 60% of them are in the negative position. But again, negative by $125, negative $150. Because you don't put any money into the tax credits, you put a piece of land in that does not go in as cash, and you do not get equity for that. You have to put cash in.
Really helpful, thank you. I have no further questions. Anybody have any other further questions? Okay, so back to Director Wenig and then Director Weber.
Just to follow up on what our chair was just discussing and you were explaining, Chad, a process question for staff. Where would these K1s be going in our staffing structure currently? Where do they exist?
Primarily to Keith, but it's one of the things that we will want to clean up because some of them may have been coming through Subra previously. And so I think this will actually be will be something we'll take up a little bit and when we talk about portfolio management or portfolio review. Not because, I mean, that may be one of the things we review, but it's also a prelude to us sort of setting up, you know, what does our management structure look like for reviewing all of these documents as they come in regularly on, yes, what is
So
now
to be
23.
determined.
Correct.
Okay. Chad, for you on page 16 and accompanying pages, do you have in your eloquent style a way of describing in plain speak the variation in the percentages, the bottom line percentages for each related party transaction?
Yeah, can someone throw that up on the screen just so I can see it at the same time? Because I don't have the ability to switch screens right this second. Is it easy enough to throw up there?
There you go.
There we are.
Oh boy, these are fun.
They weren't so fun for me.
How do I make this simple? Okay, so let me explain. I'm in Florida right now. That's why I'm in a hotel room, and I was just here training on LIHTC because the client I'm training on is getting into LIHTC deals. LIHTC deals are very complex. Okay, strategic housing itself is not a complex organization, right? It's pretty easy. I can succinctly describe what you do. Tax credit deals on every single one of these, if you see them as you go down, like I said, you have 30 of them, are each uniquely individual. They can be completely different from one another. So each one of these notes is trying to describe to the reader in as succinct as possible we can the agreements you have for each LP. And even by that means, they can change from LP to LCs. You can see on here, the names change, they change formations. So to succinctly describe that is really hard for me to do other than tell you it's very complex and each one of them is set up differently. Each one of them have an ownership agreement. An ownership agreement will tell you exactly what you're going to get at the end when the tax credit's over, who gets what the buyout is, but each one of them has it. And each ownership agreement, I would guarantee you, is no less than 50 pages, probably closer to 120 pages. I do read these on a regular basis when we audit them. I have a lot of entities that have these as included in their financial statements, and I have to read the agreements when they're in there. And that's why another reason, like we were talking about at the very beginning, why we chose not to put all these in and disclaim the opinion, the cost that we would charge you to add all of these in, because then I have to read all these agreements and I have to understand all those agreements in order to put them in and opine on them. I also have to work with all those auditors that audited these financial statements and get their agreement that I'm going to use their numbers. To give you an idea, it would roughly double your audit fee, just so you kind of know what you're looking at if you go down that pathway. And why in the past they have not done that. They have said, we're not going to gain anything from that. You may decide you do. I can't argue either way. I'm not management. I don't make those decisions. I'm an accountant. I would always put them in because I would want to see them. But I can't argue with the cost either of, if it costs you twice as much to get information that you have elsewhere, because each one of these tax credits is audited and you can see their audit report. It's just not in your report.
Oh, thank you. You did it in plain speak. I really appreciate it. Just throwing it back real quick. Are you aiming at standardization here on any level and or a trend?
Say more about what you might mean by that.
The variation is...
You are talking about the variation in the percentage of ownership.
Yes,
I mean, the similarity between them is that they are all extremely small.
correct.
So I don't think you see any ownership above, north of 1% on any of these deals. So I don't view it as particularly material, whether it's, 0.01 or 0.005. And, these are already done and inked. So we can certainly look at, I'm intellectually curious about why one is, a half a, 1/10 of a percentage bigger, but I don't view it as significantly material to our interests. What's more material is the nature of the other terms in those partnership agreements. So, how much cash flow we get, which is really some of the things that we talk about when you approve deals. I expect that we have quite a bit of variation over the years in these projects, and it would be nice to get to a place where we at least say, here's our starting place, and here's how much we might vary in between the deals. And importantly, we've got 23 of these projects right now. 23 have closed partnerships, and as Chad said, about let's just say 100 pages a piece, and that's just the partnership agreement. There are tons of other agreements surrounding the deal. So I am interested, as part of our portfolio review, which we'll talk about here in a moment, in asking some of the consultants we engage to at least summarize the high points of the deal structure for each of these, so we have an easy way to go, South Park, what's the structure on that deal, and we don't have to go back to the original document every single time to find out.
Any other questions about the audit, Director Wenning? Okay, on the floor, it goes to Director Weber. Questions about the audit or questions about the audit to staff?
I would just like to ask that for a training at some future time, when appropriate, probably part of the portfolio review, to look at one of our partners, K1, and audit and just understand how all the pieces fit together.
Great. Excellent.
No more questions? Steph, any questions or final statements on this?
I don't believe so, Chad. I think we've gotten the, one or two of the items that were pending to move us toward finalization in the last day or so, and we'll be following up with Smith Marion. So hope to get this taken care of in the next couple weeks or so.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us from the Sunshine State.
Thank you. I'm gonna go sit on the beach for a while. I'm just kidding. I gotta go do work. I gotta go do work. There's no sitting on the beach. I know my team members think I'm sitting on the beach, but I've got to go to work. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. In any event, we're going to skip South Park Ranch as that is going to be further developed, and we're going to move to portfolio review planning.
Yes. And actually, in your package, immediately after, I intended to have this immediately after the agenda, and I inadvertently put the audit before it. So this is in black and white. It's not going to be that useful to you as it stands, but in what I emailed you is a PDF that is in color. It is a cheat sheet of sort of where we are currently with scheduled board. The audit is 24 pages long. It's right after that, if that helps. There you go. Thank you. See how pretty it is. That, where we are in terms of our work sessions, our voting sessions, and our committee meetings. So this is just a handy dandy, piece. We will, happy to send it separately, and inevitably we will occasionally need to shift. But if you're doing forward planning, feel free to use it. Debbie will also soon be sending out the calendar invites for upcoming meetings. Any questions on that?
Director Running, questions about the schedule?
Yeah, just real quick to staff. First, thank you so much for getting us organized. It's overwhelming looking at this, particularly for people with multiple appointments. However, does it go without saying that meetings are called when there's an agenda that needs to be addressed?
I think that we have standing meeting times. Certainly the chair at any time can say, we're not having that meeting. And we're always happy if we really don't have anything to meet about to say we don't need to meet. This was an attempt to get it on our calendar so we weren't finding a need to meet and then taking 2 or 3 weeks to, to get it on the calendar.
Appreciate that. That's all I have.
Okay. Portfolio review.
Thank you. Thank you for humoring me on that. So as we pull up the slides, I will remind the board that at our April meeting, you passed a resolution directing staff to develop a plan to review our multifamily portfolio and to update you and this month. And so what we're talking about today is mostly the general scope of the portfolio review and how we're proceeding to execute on that. I'll give you a little bit of an update as we go about some of the potential consultant engagements that we're looking at. We will still have some to do, I think, in terms of getting help. So when we talk about portfolio review, and I apologize, that is plural and should be singular, we are talking about deals just like we were talking about with the audit where we have an ownership stake in the deal. And I say that because over the years, over the 20 years of SHFC's, almost exactly 20 years of SHFC's existence, you have induced bonds for a lot of low-income housing tax credits. Some of those you didn't take an ownership stake in. And so those deals are out there functioning, but remember when someone has borrowing related to the bond, we're not responsible for it. We have no liability there. So it doesn't have a lot of impact on our ongoing operations. Now, if the board wanted to extend a portfolio review to those, I think that would significantly increase the scope, and we don't have a lot of control over none, essentially. No. So, just to be clear, that's the universe we're looking at. These, right now, 23 projects where we have closed a partnership. Of those 23, 17 are operational. The last one being Wild Horse Flats, which Director Becker visited with us a few weeks ago. We have 6 additional properties, 4 of which are in construction, and 2 are have yet to break ground. As we explore portfolio review, we may find that there are elements that we want to review for the deals that are under construction, but my assumption going in here is our primary interest is properties that are operating, that have tenants, where we can look at the, the quality, the experience of tenants, and the financial position, et cetera. So in terms of purpose, I think what we've heard from the board as being priorities are first and foremost, and I think very informed by the experience with Rosemont, ensuring that the physical quality of the housing is strong. We want to assess the operating health of these properties. How are they doing financially? What are we seeing in the trends? And related to that, that will also help us as we refine our revenue projections as an organization, right? So it's not just about, and I'll get into this in a little bit, but we're going to do our revenue projections in part on what our partnership agreements say the fees that we have are entitled to, but frankly, many of those fees are based on the property's cash flowing, and so if the properties aren't operating well, we might not realize those. And I apologize, I'm a little bit, I have to look around the camera. So we want to do this clearly, first and foremost, to identify any significant problems we have in our portfolio. Whether that's property condition or operations, those things are often linked. We want to know if we need to respond and do course correction on any of these properties. The second piece is that we intend to really build out our ongoing compliance and monitoring, and this speaks a little bit to what Director Wenig was mentioning, even around how are we regularly reviewing the financials, et cetera. So I think this will really inform that process. And then not just how do we monitor properties, but what we learn may lead us to different policy decisions about the kinds of deals we approve at the outset and what some of our terms are. And so as we look at this work, which we know is a priority, both in terms of its importance and in terms of the timing, we think that the most effective way to do this on a relatively quick turnaround is to probably work with multiple partners for different pieces of the analysis. 2 pieces that we've already identified and are speaking to potential consultants on is one, really using Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs compliance system, which is already existing, and having a thorough review of that existing compliance documentation to identify any risks. Second, reviewing the financial statements of each of the properties, both today and over time, to understand trends and any risks. And then again, looking at the partnership agreements, as we talked about before, to do the forward-looking projection of what revenue we might anticipate in the coming, not just the coming year, but a multi-year period. Let me pause there. I can talk a little bit more about detail, but any comments or questions on the overview piece?
Comments or questions at this time? Nope, let's keep going.
Next slide. So in terms of timeline, and we do not have signed contracts, although I do have a draft contract that we probably will execute today or tomorrow for one piece of it, that will look to contract at least a couple of the primary consultants this month. It would appear that we can have the review of the THCA compliance documentation by the end of the month. That can happen fairly quickly. That will help inform some of the additional steps, like where do we see red flags? And as we do it, I think we'll find there are pieces of information that we may be particularly interested in that aren't really represented in the compliance documentation, and we need to figure out a way to supplement it. I would anticipate that in June, we would begin review of all of the financial statements of each of these partnerships. And again, looking at the partnership agreements to begin to project forward what we think our revenue is likely to be over a multi-year period. I will say that we do anticipate that through at least one of our engaged consultants, we will have unannounced visits to properties to get some baseline, both of day-to-day conditions, not just sort of code violations, but how does it look? How is it operating? How is property management engaging with someone who comes on site? And so my hope then is that we would be prepared to give the board a briefing, near final briefing in July. We may have some additional research that's happening during that time, and to finalize reports in August.
Does that conclude your presentation? Okay, why don't, in the interest of time, why don't we conclude the presentation and then open it up to all questions?
Okay, great.
All right?
Sounds good. Next slide. So just in terms of the deliverables, we are conceptualizing this in two areas. One is we'd like to have some high-level reports that allow us to look at the portfolio as a whole. So if I say, like, I got 17 operating properties, what is my average occupancy? What is our what are our arrears look like, et cetera, and also what's the unit mix? How many total 60% units do we have? 50% units, and by bedrooms. So some just really descriptive data, and then really selecting, not everything, but some of the high level performance indicators that will let us look at the performance of our portfolio over time. And then we would anticipate having a summary document for each of the properties that gives us a sort of, again, relatively high level, but more detail here about what we have found about each of the properties in a number of criteria, and importantly, any identified risks and any recommendations that our partners have for corrective action. Next slide. Finally, I just very quickly, I think there are two broad areas that we are focusing on in this review. One is housing quality and tenant experience. So we certainly want to know about physical condition. I already mentioned the unannounced site visits. The other piece is that based on what we see in TDHCA compliance and what we see in the unannounced site visits, we may elect to do a full physical needs assessment on certain properties, so we really understand what would be needed, to bring this property, if it needs to be brought up to a standard that the board is comfortable with. On tenant experience, I don't know that we have shared this with the whole board, but many of you may have seen the eviction dashboard that BASTA published last week or 2 weeks ago. And I think that this is, what the primary metric they use is how many evictions are being filed for a property compared to the number of units. And I think that's a good beginning point for us to be tracking what are we seeing in terms of the experience of our tenants. We are also looking for other ways to capture tenant feedback through this. That's something we know already exists, and we can work with BASTA to get data on. And then finally, of course, these units we're tracking affordability, and both in terms of the affordability of the rent and the income certification of the families occupying the units. So that is something we'll be paying attention to. We would like to capture, and I understand it is part of TDHCA's reporting structure, the number of voucher holders that are in these properties, because they are required, or I should say they are constrained from denying people only because they hold a voucher. We don't know if that means that, in fact, people with vouchers are able to really access these units, and we may want to look at incentivizing or requiring in some way that landlords do accept them. On the next slide, On the financial side, sort of three areas are first, operating health. I think this is really important as we are in a market that is softening somewhat in terms of rents and occupancy rates. So we have been tracking occupancy rates. We have been seeing them trend downward, which is true of the market at large. But importantly, what does that mean in terms of the cash flow of these properties? Are they able to meet their current expenses with the rents they are capturing? Is that impacting any trend in their reserves? Do we see a slowdown, for example, in expenditures on repairs and maintenance, which we know is something that sometimes happens when a property begins to struggle? So all of those are things we want to be tracking so that we have an eye on any problem properties. Revenue projection, I'll just say, I think the main thing here is that most of our projects, if you think about when we come to you and say, here's our public benefit ratio, right? And here are the fees that we anticipate capturing on a deal. It's made up of several one-time fees, like we close the deal, early on. So usually in the first 2 or 3 years after we start construction, we get considerable fees. We get some fees during construction. Then we have annual flat fees often, right?
Yes.
$50,000 a year, for example. Then we have we get a portion of the cash flow. So that, can go up and down depending on how the property is performing. We want to look at all of those because it's not just, we won't necessarily get the same amount on a property year after year, particularly in the first few years. And for us to plan, I think as we enter what we were excited about as a growth stage for the organization, we really need to understand what our revenue outlook is to support that growth. Finally, I think this disposition is a fancy, word for what happens at the end of the rainbow for these deals. If we want to sell them, if our partners want to sell their interest, which is something we're seeing some of now, what's likely to happen? So one of the project that will bring to you, one of the projects we'll bring to you at the board voting session is a situation where one of the partners is leaving the partnership several years in, right? And we're kind of having to reposition. In some cases, there may be a back end for us. If someone leaves, we get paid, or maybe look, eventually, if we're at 20 years today, we're not so far from 30 years when these deals, the affordability period ends, or somebody gets to 25 years and says, let's sort of refinance this whole thing and re-up for a bunch of some additional years. Those transactions have implications for us, which could be we stand to capture some revenue. It may cost us something in some cases, depending on what we want to do. And it has policy implications. Do we want to stay in deals that are older, right, that might be closer to affordable without our tax exemption, et cetera? Right now, we have a general idea of how many of these kind of older properties we have in our portfolio, but I think we have heard members of the board say we need to get a better handle on that, on what's coming, toward us so that we can be prepared. I think that's the last slide.
Questions or discussion? Director Wenig, you have your hand up, so you're first in the queue.
Yeah, so going back to the beginning, sorry, I'm chewing. Do you expect or anticipate posting this as an RFP and RFQ, and do you need board direction on when and how we decide to make it an RFP, RFQ? I'm not clear myself,
right. Sure,
to be
sure.
totally honest and transparent.
So we are not required, first of all, these aren't federal funds, and that's usually, at least from a formal standpoint, what would require you, or even other government funds, to issue a formal RFP. There is always a tension there between, we love a broad competition and transparency and clarity, and it adds quite significant time to the process. So in conversations we have had with the board and among staff about, I think we want to get a good baseline here as quickly as we can with good partners. It is my initial impulse is that we probably would not issue a formal RFP. So let me tell you about the two consultant types that we are in conversation with right now that we would may need to supplement or have further scope, sort of a larger scope with them. One is the former head of the compliance division at Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs. So no one could be much better positioned to understand how to utilize that system for us to look at the data and identify risks. And another is a CPA firm that SHFC has worked with before, but one of the services that they specialize in is doing this. We look at your partnership agreements and we project that revenue out. So those are two pretty big pieces of the scope that we've described. We will be talking with them about, here are some other things we'd like to do, could that be worked into the scope? And then I think we'll need to assess whether we need additional help. I have been sort of identifying potential firms that might be able to work with us on that, but right now I feel like on balance issuing a formal RFP would add easily 60 days to the process and probably not get us significantly better product, but certainly open to the board's guidance there.
Do you have an additional question, Director White?
So along those same lines, with or without an RFP, is there any concern or need for board action you have about the amount the contracts would represent in terms of monetary, and are monetary restrictions on how much you can do
Sure.
without board approval and so forth?
So the initial review of TDHCA's compliance data is coming in under the level the board has set as threshold for requiring board approval. So I know that I am able to move forward on that without board action. As we learn more from our other potential partners, we may need to come to the board to do that. Right now, I feel comfortable. Plausible that could happen in May. The other piece is that we may also identify a smaller piece of the work that allows us to get started and then come to the board if we want to authorize an amount that's over and above the $75,000.
And finally, thank you. That's all really clear. And thank you for the entire presentation and the way that you've looked at the scope and the detail that we're looking for. It just matches very much my expectations and exceeds them. So thank you. I just wanted to say, in the past, we've benefited from having updated portfolio occupancy rate data. I'm looking at some from February where there was actually an increase in occupancy underway. Is that something that happens on the regular that we can monitor just quietly? You know, is it on a dashboard somewhere, or?
So it is something that has been done, but I think that particularly as we have really intensified the transaction flow, we're feeling the strain of staffing around, because it's also not an automatic report right now. It's requiring staff to call every single property. Having said that, I think that we can anticipate having it in the board package for the May meeting, an updated version.
Sounds great. Thank you. That's all I have.
Any other questions? Any guidance anybody would like to provide at this time?
I have a
Director Becker.
not guidance. I have a question. If somebody can explain it to me. I'm curious if the market softens, and let's say the average rent is $1,200, but the property manager drops it to $1,000. Do the affordable units also get a decrease by nature or by contract?
They can. So our current portfolio is almost 100% at 60% AMI, right?
Correct.
We've got a bunch of deals under construction and that we've approved that have a more substantial income mix, including market rate. So yes, if you are an affordable housing operator of deals like are in our portfolio, by sort of the program guidelines and regulations, yes, you can charge up to this month, 60% rent. If market is actually below that, and you don't lower it, you're sure to have, more significant occupancy problems, right? Because people are saying, why would I come to you if I can get it for $1,000 elsewhere? So, in principle, one would anticipate the property management should lower that rent to market. Anecdotally, I've spoken with folks who say affordable housing property managers are so accustomed to just using sort of the statutory or the regulatory rent, right, the affordable rent, that they sometimes can be slow to lower that rent to market. And so I think that's one of the things that we'll be exploring as we look at our portfolio, properties where if we're having increasing concerns about occupancy, do we need to have conversations about, hey, we know this is the affordable rent, but market's down here. What do we have to do to get there?
Okay.
And that's not an unusual conversation to have when you start seeing market fluctuations.
Okay. That tracks with what I thought was true.
Okay.
Director Record, do you have any other questions? Okay, you yield the floor. All right. I have a few points I wanted to make. This is very exciting. I think once we release our report, it should be a big deal. We did this. Here's what we found. Here's how it's gonna impact our operations. This is what you do when you want to be the best HFC. So once we have comms and more capacity, if at the discretion of staff, of course, and if they think it's ultimately a good idea, saying more publicly, we did this. This is the right thing to be doing every once in a while. Here's what we found. Number 2, I'm so excited that we're gonna get folks to help us have a sense of our revenue trajectory, and I would encourage staff to make this a time where we basically build a new spreadsheet for our revenue model that can take plugs such as market conditions and be able to give us a sense of our financial health on a monthly basis. One of the things that we've had before was the occupancy sheet, and that kind of gave us a sense of how we're doing, because if they're filled, then it can't be that bad. But having a sense of here's what we expect over a prolonged period of time, over 10 years, given the market conditions this quarter, here's what we think we're going to be. Being able to have that instrumentation is helpful, and so as you engage these partners and bring capacity, building that new spreadsheet, your new kind of Power Excel would be helpful. As you do the physical assessment, I expect recommendations about what we should be asking for in our terms to protect assets moving forward. And Director Becker has really lit a fire in me around construction standards and design and architecture, whereas before I was just like, units are units, who cares? And now I'm like, oh man, this insulation. Oh man, these. Wait, stucco's not so bad. Whatever. All this stuff. I'm just like, oh, masonry is expensive. Things like that. I'm just like, this matters a lot. And if you think about it, yes, when we say we're a financing entity, or we're also sort of GPs apparently, and we're in the development conversation, and so us maybe creating incentives around things that we think will make the property experience better. I'm thinking in particular, and this is just my personal traumas, I guess, around HVAC and insulation, things of this nature, common lighting, common spaces. So I'm expecting recommendations where you come back and hopefully say, here's what we found out about our structures. Here are some things that I think we need to do better. Here's what happens when you use tile versus carpet in the bathroom, whatever it is, not in the bathroom, but in hallways, etc. You know, I want granular.
We're not going to find a ton of carpet in the bathroom.
No, I hope that it was a joke, but I realized it was going to sail over. But I expect, hopefully, this is my brown M&M on this. If like the property management, the physical inspection conversation doesn't come back with some observations that we can incorporate into terms and discussions moving forward. On property management, to summarize, I think in future deals, we should have a property management information exchange standard where they send us the occupancy data.
Agree.
And we have a baseline understanding of you must do
Yep.
net promoter with your tenants once a year and share that with us. To them, that's a $10,000 a year cost. Who cares, right? With most of the partnerships we have. For us, obviously, it's catastrophic to try and, you know, finagle our way after the fact or,
Right.
you know, assign staff to do this. So kind of being able to have a property management standard would be really helpful. I already spoke about construction recommendations. One more thing, you know, one of the reasons I think this is a big deal, it would be really nice if, as we get a little bit more street cred, we could work with the other HFCs, PFCs, etc., to standardize some of these things. Like, we all put this in our deals around the information exchange on property management. We all sort of have a sense of what good architecture is. We all have a sense of and share data around market outlook. So we have a sense of our 5-year, 10-year trajectory, and we're not so siloed. That might also be helpful because if, for example, as part of this a Hauser consortium, Hauser data consortium, we want to keep tracking eviction data, not in-house, but externally, which has some advantages in that, you know, external folks can be more creative and feisty in a way that we do not want to be with people we are in economic partnership with. We just sort of write a check to the consortium, and the consortium writes a check to a vendor, as opposed to now where we kind of we're at the mercy of when, you know, BASTA can secure grant funding to track something that is of importance to us. I think this is a really important initiative. I really like everything that has been said. I am definitely a supporter of, for the moment, no big procurement friction so that we can accelerate to get this done this year. That may change depending on, you know, how things go, but that's my current outlook. And that concludes all the guidance that I have on this item. Any additional guidance folks want to prepare or provide before we move on? Dr. Wenning.
Just to sort of piggyback on the big deal thing, big deal to the public, big deal to Hausers, big deal to our partners, our stakeholders, to everybody we've been in alignment with, and some who've been critical of us in the past. Also a big deal to the County Commissioners Court. So not sure we've really figured out a pattern of regular relationship building there, but this would fit into that. Yeah.
Good feedback. If there's no additional guidance, we're going to move quickly to Robert's Rules. Okay, and that is a staff presentation.
All right, so this Robert's Rules is one of the things that the board had requested some orientation and training on, and it, if I recall correctly, at our last board meeting, our chair did some informal training, sort of beginning to socialize the process, some of the rules that we are using. So, fun facts, because we love history. Robert's Rules, I always wondered, who's this Robert guy? All right.
Nice.
Published in 1876 by an Army Brigadier General, Henry Robert. It was adapted from the U.S. House of Representatives, so if it feels quite formal, there's a reason for that. And as you guys know, many of you, I mean, you all have, and some of you may have with you the handy dandy laminated guide. What are we calling it?
The Shakespeare rules.
The Shakespeare rules,
They're-
which are quite extensive, right? They govern a lot of in fact, to be recognized by your chair, you must stand and remain standing while speaking. So I think that there are some of these things we are not going to use, probably most of them. But I think the piece that I'm focusing on today is really about motions, which are the things that kind of help our meetings move along smoothly and for us to understand process. Having said that, if the board is particularly interested in other elements of this, we're happy to come back, etc. I do want to say that many of the things that are here as rules that are quite formal are things that if we adopted, we would want to have in our bylaws because we have a formal governing document, right? This gets used also by entities that may not have bylaws or articles, etc. All right, next slide. So in terms of sort of the guiding principles of Robert's rules and the orderly run of a meeting, the primary consideration is that only one thing or a main motion should be discussed at a time. So that you're staying focused, you're dealing with a question at hand or deciding not to and moving on. The chair is responsible for recognizing speakers. Everyone has a right to participate in the discussion if they wish. And that as a general principle, try to allow every board member, so not everyone, but every board member, to chime in on a subject before someone speaks for a second time. That only urgent matters should.
Hello,
Welcome.
Director Reeves. Your chair. We have a chair and agenda and stuff.
Yes. Only urgent matters should. Would you acknowledge?
I would like to acknowledge that Director Lisa Reems has joined our quorum.
Sorry, everyone, for me being late.
No, glad you're here.
No worries. And there's food.
The time is
And it is now, by my watch, 12:42 p.m.
excellent. And that, so all of these contribute to decorum in the meeting. It's orderly, no personal attacks on other members. There's respectful dialogue. Next slide. So as I said, the primary motor here is the motion. And so motion is the topic under discussion. I move that we approve resolution XYZ. I move that we direct staff to bring coffee to every meeting and candy. Proposed that resolution is example of a main motion. You are recognized by the chair to present the motion. It does require a second to be considered, which we have been doing. And something that I think does require a little more discipline is that each motion on the table is supposed to be addressed, whether passed, formally deferred, defeated, etc., before you move on to another motion under consideration. So there are general steps for main motions. Most of these I think we have been following and will feel familiar to you, but for me there's some nuance here that I certainly in my own life and sort of my own meeting life have probably not been following. A member asks for permission or the chairperson grants permission for someone to make a motion. Formally, we should be stating what the motion is for the record. We have a resolution with a number. It's probably easy enough to refer to that numbered resolution. Chairperson asked for a second. Calling out a second or raising a hand as acknowledged by the chairperson is fine. And if there is that second, then debate is opened. So during debate, there are some things that can happen to the motion. It can be amended. You can substitute a motion, a related motion, or table. But outside of those, generally you need to, as we say, dispose of the motion before you move on to a new topic. Once debate is concluded, chairperson puts the motion to a vote, counts the votes, and announces the passage or defeat of the motion. So we'll talk a little bit about some of these other actions, the amendment, substitution, et cetera, on the next slide. So, let's say that we have a motion on the table, which is we resolve to direct staff to bring candy to every meeting. And Director Reams is smart, and she's like, I would like to amend this to it be chocolate candy. We need to be more specific here, because who knows what these fools are going to do if we don't. So two things happen. One, you have to vote that you're willing to amend the motion. So we'd like to make an amendment. Are we open to an amendment? That vote. So yes, we're open to an amendment. Then Director Reams would propose the wording. I propose that we change the wording to say staff bring chocolate candy to every meeting, and then you vote on that. It passes or fails. If it were to fail, you would go back to the original motion. You can do something similar with a substitute, which is, I just want to, all of this language doesn't work. Let's start clean. Let's direct staff to bring fruit trays and something else delicious, cheese, to every meeting, right? And again, that if it is seconded, then you would vote between the two motions. Do you want to direct staff to bring candy, or would you prefer to direct staff to bring these other things? This requires management and discernment on the part of the chair, so we appreciate that, and it's a bit challenging to manage, I think, that logical process. The other thing that you can do is say, I just don't think we're ready to make a decision on this, or we have other issues. I want to postpone this to our next meeting, or next month, or 3 months from now. You can make a motion while there's this other active motion on the table to push the motion off. If it passes, then you've dealt with that initial motion and you've postponed it. If not, you go back to considering it. You can move to refer to a committee. We need the minds in our Human Resources Committee to really give us feedback on this. Let's do that. To table the motion is just say, let's stop considering it right now. You can still bring it up again in the same meeting if you like. If you don't actively bring it up again, it dies. Move to close the debate. Diana is talking way too much. Can we just get to it? We probably already know. So move to close the debate. You actually wouldn't say which staff person is blabbing or whatever. Simply move to close the debate. It does require a 2/3 vote. To just sort of let's end conversation and call a vote at this time. And move to postpone indefinitely is effectively killing a motion. That also requires 2/3 vote. Let's go back. Any?
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Director Weber has a question.
Does this slide address, and I don't think it does, what happens if whoever wanted candy doesn't like Lisa's amendment? Do they get to say that? Like, no, I don't want you to amend my motion.
My understanding is that, well, first of all, this may be perhaps a question for us to clarify. I have seen in other settings a friendly amendment where the initial person says, I accept that, let's change it, let's go ahead.
Yeah.
But if you don't, then you might say, I'm moving to amend, I don't care whether they like it or not. A vote would be called on whether you're going to consider the amended version, right? So you could not even have enough votes to take that up, right? Or you could say, yeah, we're let's the group says, yes, let's consider this amendment, and then you vote on the actual amendment. It feels like it's a little bit of a two-step process, and honestly, I would say this is an area where we are not following Robert's rules, to a T. If you wanted to say, you know what, when we have an amendment like this, do you want to vote to consider amendment and then vote on the amendment itself, or do you want a slightly more streamlined process? I see President Altamirano studying his Shakespeare guide furiously.
No, because what you said, if I, to interrupt, is the practice that I have participated in, where the motion maker can accept a friendly amendment that is discerned as cleanup or
Right.
an enhancement that is unanimous. But the Shakespeare rules do not seem to include that norm, which is one that you see in high volume bodies, and we would, in our situation, probably not have friendly, unfriendly. We would just say, let's have a quick vote about the amendment, but we can research it. Excuse me. That's how I would facilitate the meeting for the remainder of the year. I'd just be like, if you want to make an amendment, make an amendment, and we'll go through it quickly. Whereas in big bodies with high volume, that can just be the source of a 2-hour conversation. So that would be my inclination at this time. But I will read these more carefully when I come to a conclusion. Does that answer your question, Director Weber? Any other questions about motions? Staff, would you like to continue with the presentation?
Yes. So there are other procedural motions, and they are sometimes called privileged motions or incidental motions, which aren't about a sort of necessarily a material, a substantive decision you're making, right, as a board, but about what's happening in the room, etc. So let's go through some examples. And these can interrupt a speaker. These can come in when you have an active motion on the table otherwise. So question of privilege. In this room, we have had previously difficulty hearing, for example. So last month, we might have had the folks sitting on this side of the room as we were having a presentation say, question of privilege, really having trouble hearing, can we have the speakers, raise their volume, please? To get information about the rules. So I am, for example, we have an amendment on the table and I am confused about where we are in this process. Are we voting whether we want to amend? Are we considering a substitute? What? And so you could say I have a parliamentary inquiry. This is typically directed at the chair. Can you clarify for us where we are in this process or what the proper process is? Point of information. This is much of what we do at our meetings, where you're asking natural questions about something that is being presented or considered, particularly when you're in debate. So you might be in debate. We have friendly debate here, right? Warm, friendly, collegial debate. But you might, during that, as you're discussing with your peers the pros and cons of a decision, want to ask staff for additional information. So that is one area you might use that. Call for the orders of the day. I hope we use this because I think it's so silly and informal, which is, hey guys, can we get back to the agenda? It feels like we're talking about things that are not on the agenda. And so you can call for the orders of the day and do it with a flourish, preferably. Finally, very common, a move to recess. We now have food at our meetings. Some of our meetings, may go a little long, and so at some point you may feel like it would be a great time to take a break, and you can move for a recess to allow for that. I believe that's the last slide. Can you confirm for me? Yes.
Okay. Any discussion or questions? Director Wenning.
Yeah, really helpful, really clarifying. Glad you focused on the motions. There are areas that, as a board, that precedes your time with us, that were one of the reasons I chose this particular Shakespeare version. And that has to do with wanting to understand more about how we would implement, if necessary, disciplinary procedures. It's an area that was pretty acutely needed at the time, no longer pressing. but something I'd really like to learn more about. And I think we've resolved what constitutes a quorum, but just to clarify once again, in this virtual world, the quorum has to be physically present. And in order to establish a quorum at the beginning of the meeting, we have to do a head count on people physically present, is my understanding. Is that everybody else?
We're looking at Vela because actually my read of our bylaws is that, at least according to our bylaws, you could allow for electronic meeting to meet quorum, but that we can come back.
I think
to
I need
that.
clarification on
Okay.
that then. Yeah, that would be helpful to me. Yeah.
Any other questions? Any other questions?
Might just keep going.
All right,
Yeah.
any other questions? Discussion? No, seeing none. We're going to move to board vacancy and succession planning. Okay, I'm going to make some quick remarks, and then we're going to go into executive session. Succession planning. Briefly, in the past, we've talked as we want to become the best housing finance corporation. We want to adopt best practices in terms of ensuring that we have a board that has the needed profiles, has harmony, and that we all have an understanding of how long we're going to be here, when we need to start planning for our replacements, what those replacements need to look like. We want to ensure that the board represents the community. We want to make sure that the board has the skill sets needed for the different phases that the organization is going to be. Staff needs to know who is going to be around, providing the governance of the enterprise, etc. So we've talked a bit about getting better at that, and there's more work to be done. One thing we did discuss is taking a more proactive stance, as a well-run board would, to planning around its vacancies. And we had a vacancy pop up, as you all know, a informal sub-quorum nominating committee consisting of the ExCom and the chair of governance. At the start of our awareness that a vacancy would need to be filled, had a conversation, and I think while we did not officially settle on a profile, either as a sub-quorum or as a board, something that I think we want to get into the process of doing with more rigor, I think we've talked about sort of 4 criteria for the type of person that we need. One is someone that is comfortable in a mission-driven environment. 2, a person that is comfortable, has some experience with quantitative and financial reasoning. 3, a person that has empathy and understands, both through life experience and work experience, the lives of our tenants, and preferably someone that represents our communities. And finally, someone that has county government familiarity, experience with elected officials, understands the quirks of the Travis County government bureaucracy. And so through that process, several of us have been looking for an individual that might fulfill that criteria. I think we are at a place where there is a potential individual that fits this profile. If this individual decides that they do want to join us, my goal would be for the nominating committee that we kind of created ad hoc to share their information with all of us, how they meet the profile, and then those of us that feel comfortable joining an official letter of support of this person's candidacy, so that when they apply to the court, which is the ultimate appointer, the court knows that this is the person that we believe fits into what we need, and also to get the court to buy into our professionalized succession planning process of the board wants to keep a harmonious body that understands the skill level and time commitment, is compatible with the mission. Here are sort of the contours of that. as opposed to what we have had in the past, which is a different process. In executive session, we'll talk a little bit more about this, but for the public's benefit, I wanted them to understand, all of you watching at home, that we are moving in a slightly different direction that I think will allow us to be more high performing in terms of our succession planning around the directors. At some point, we will also start thinking about it around the staff. Any questions about what I just said on this item? Great. We're going to move to item F. We're going to discuss personal matters related to staff as allowed by the Texas Open Meetings Act under Texas Government Code annotated 551074. We are going to go into executive session for personal matters. Now would be an appropriate time for someone to make a motion
Recess.
to go into executive session.
I make a motion that we go into executive session.
Okay. Second. So it's Becker, Weber. Staff does not need to be present for this conversation.
Did you take a vote on that, sir?
Oh, is there? Oh, sorry. Is there a vote on this motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions? No. The matter carries unanimously. We are going into executive session at 1:02 p.m. by my watch.